Welcome to 28 Days of Beyond, where we're celebrating our history, our heritage, our culture, and our own authentic voice. And once again, we have a great guest with us on the set. Welcome to the set, Vanessa.
Thank you.
I'm chopping at the bit here. Hey, Vanessa, you got a very interesting background, very diverse. Give people a snapshot of who you are.
I'm born and raised in Sweden. Moved here last semester, but both my parents are from Eritrea.
Okay. What was it like growing up in Sweden?
Interesting. I loved it. Like, I've compared it to, my friends' upbringing here and in other countries. And just the fact that I could go to daycare and go to school for free and not having to worry about that kind of things, and being able to go to school with like people from different backgrounds, both like racially, ethnically, socioeconomically, was just very, very interesting.
So how was it being in a predominant culture, looking one way, because they mostly blind here, right? And very fair.
Yeah.
You're fair, but not as fair as them. You're a fair person,
In
we know
another way.
that. So how was it, the difference, working with that and growing up in that, being raised there and everything?
I think I went to different kind of schools. So like in the beginning when I was younger, I went to, I was basically the only black girl in the class and almost in the whole school. And then I started going to an international school, which is very different. But I think just in general, like the beauty norms are very interventionist when we're really, really young. And it's just, it's an interesting culture because it's very inclusive, but at the same time it's very, also very segregated in terms of not maybe by skin color specifically, but in terms of ethnically Swedish and the rest. So I guess it's rooted in the skin color, but it's also about, are you from here really? And people always ask if I'm from here, and then when they hear me speak well Swedish, they ask if I'm adopted or if I'm half Swedish, stuff like that. So it's like being Swedish is never, or being black Swede is never like being Swedish, because you always question and you always, where are you actually from? And, being from Sweden is the only thing I have, so.
And you speak 3 languages, right, from what I understand?
3.5.
3.5? What's the half one?
French.
French, you're half French, okay. So, and you're very fluent in Sweden as well as the native tongue. And what's the native tongue of Eritreans?
Tigrinya.
Tigrinya, okay. And your parents are like pioneers. Tell people a little bit about your parents and some things that are dear to their heart. They kind of activists in and of itself.
Well, they came to Sweden during the late 80s. It was during Eritrea's independence war. So Eritrea actually only existed as an independent nation for 25 years this year. But they came from, a country that was ravaged by war. And that taught me a lot about my home country, about what was going on there, what's still going on in the country. So that's another aspect of my background that's very interesting.
Now, have you been back to, or have you been in Eritrea and all
Twice,
this?
yeah.
Twice. Now they did a commercial when you was a young lady, or like a PBS special or NPR, as we would say here.
But the Swedish version, yeah.
Swedish version.
Yeah.
They asked you a couple questions. Expound on that. Tell people what was the show about and the questions they asked you.
Well, they asked me. I was 6, so
She was 6, okay.
Have that in mind. But they asked me where I wanted to live, if I could choose. And I said, well, 50% Sweden, 50% Eritrea. And then they asked, what's the biggest difference between Eritrea and Sweden? And I said, in Sweden, there's a lot of white people and very few black people. And in Eritrea, there's a lot of black people and almost no white people. So,
Purity of kids, very honest and direct. Hey, how did you transition? How did you get to Villanova University?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I got a scholarship. It's a Swedish foundation, a really wealthy family in Sweden who owns a lot of things like banks and stuff like that. Partnered with Villanova University, together with an ex-US ambassador to Sweden. So together, the 3 of them have a scholarship for Swedish students. So that's how I'm here.
Now, and we gonna get to that shirt because I'm real intrigued about that. But one more question about Villanova. How was it transitioning to Villanova, just culturally coming from, a quote unquote socialist, as they say, not my terminology.
I don't mind. Socialist country is fine for me.
I'm just, we got it, this crazy political landscape. But how was it just transitioning coming from Sweden to the States and to a campus like Villanova University?
Difficult.
Okay.
I think I was shocked, and a lot of people were shocked of how shocked I was, because I am from Sweden, which we talked about, is a very not as segregated here, but it's still like a very segregated country. We have our own problems, but we also have a fundamental understanding of our own problems. And I think coming here was very hard, because I remember first week I just had to, we were in a group having a group discussion, and I had like several times to say like racism exists in America, and people were like, no, we don't have slavery anymore, we're equal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I've heard that so many times coming here. So I think that part, a lot of like other social issues that are not as progressive as it is in Sweden. So it was very interesting.
Okay, now that shirt. What does that shirt represent? Come on, talk to us now.
This is my organization.
Okay.
I started 2.5 years ago, and it's for political prisoners and journalists in Eritrea who have been imprisoned without any trials, without any official arrest, any charges or anything. But I founded it because my uncle is one of them.
Okay.
So he was in prison in 2001, still in prison, still fighting in jail, and we're still fighting on the other side for him to be released.
Now share with people, because like you say, the state's a little different, and here we can speak about and talk about anybody all the time, every time, regardless if it's the president or the government. Tell people why it's your uncle, right?
Yeah, it's my uncle.
Tell people why your uncle got locked up.
So basically, like I said before, Eritrea has only been an independent nation for 25 years. So the transition from newly funded country into democracy was supposed to happen in the course of 10 years. And in 2001, my uncle was writing, what is happening? Where's the democratic transition we were talking about? Where's the elections? The government was shutting down student protest. So he just asked for like democratic transition, human rights, stuff like that, and basically was imprisoned because of that.
So you've been here for a short period of time, but it seemed like you world traveled. You got an international intellect, I can say, with your diverse background. When you look at our political landscape, if you don't mind diving into that, and then understanding your uncle who spoke out against the government and some of the freedoms we have here, what are some of those differences that you see just coming from Sweden and being illustrated?
I mean, there's a lot of differences, but I think in terms of like freedom of expression specifically, since it's your First Amendment, which so many of you hold so dearly, which I respect, it's just I think that a lot of people see it more as their right to offend someone else here, rather than the right to speak up for themselves or the right to be themselves. So discussion is very different here than it is in Sweden or in like, Eritrea, where my uncle's in prison.
Now, are people shocked when you tell them that you're from Sweden?
Every time. And
you fluent in the language. I just, what are some of the questions that come to mind? What are some of the, or they just say, oh, everything's free over there and all that good stuff. And
well, I have one of my best friends here is also Swedish, but she's white. And usually when we meet new people, I usually let her present herself first, just because. And then she's like, oh, I'm from Sweden. And then they're like, oh, cool. And then they barely ask me, and I'm like, oh, I'm from Sweden too. And they're like, really? We had no idea. And the only difference between us, like I've lived in Sweden more than she has. She's half American, but for them, it's easier for them to identify her as Swedish because she fits the Swedish norm.
So what's your major?
Oh, here? I'm only here for a year, so I don't get to declare, but I'm doing law when I go back to Sweden.
Now, what makes you want to practice law, and what kind of law? Is it civil rights kind of law?
I want to do human rights law.
Human rights, okay.
So yeah, I want to work internationally.
So why is that near and dear to you? I mean, what are some of the things that promoted you want to take that?
I think
practice that law.
I worked on my my first and only lawsuit, but it's called habeas corpus, and it applies to international law. So it's basically you're writing a statement asking for the body. Habeas corpus is just like asking for a body. And I did that for my uncle, together with other lawyers from Sweden, France, and England. And that was a year ago exactly. But even before that, I wanted to do law. Partly because in the beginning I wanted to do like law in the court, but now I'm transitioning more to human rights law just because of my interest for human rights.
Okay. As we close, are you allowed to communicate with your uncle, like your parents and everything?
Oh, no one is.
Wow.
Not a single person has talked to him since he was in prison.
So you're not allowed to write letters or anything like that?
We're not even allowed to know exactly where it is, but there's been prison guards who have fled the prison, who have told people where they are. So. Wow. Once again, we are out of time. I had to pull more for. Hey, we once again appreciate you tuning in with 28 Days and Beyond. We celebrate our history, our heritage, and our culture in our own authentic voice. And we thank Vanessa for coming to the set. Hey, thanks coming to the 28 Days and Beyond set.